Hello, welcome. So this is a grand experiment here for the Uniformer, a 4 or 5 year old podcast, and we're trying to go live with episodes at this point. Fascinating that no one's here for the live version yet, according to the little eye in the upper corner there. I'm Rick Levine, the executive director for the NAUMD, Network Association of Uniform Manufacturers and Distributors. And my first willing guest for the live version, Natalie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, so I'm Natalie Wilson. I'm founder and MD of Workwear Solutions, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the board directors at NAUMD.
Nice. And I think you were the first, maybe the only, non-US based or North American based, right?
Yeah, non-North American based director as well. So I'm kind of there to bring the UK and European perspective and to talk about all the reasons why those things are very different across the pond.
Yes, but we share more than we are different, I believe. But
we do.
Yeah. So tell us about Workwear Solutions International, like the company, the types of organizations that you're helping and the markets.
Yeah, perfect. So the business was set up 10 years ago, and we started off supporting suppliers, doing tender processes and developing product. And then several years ago, we pivoted into the end user and the buyer side. So as that has grown, we no longer work with manufacturers, dealer distributors, but we support the end user buyers. So we provide them with technical support to go through procurement processes. We specialize in the sort of difficult and dangerous, I like to call it. So complex procurement processes for things that range from body armor to PT sportswear for the military and every combat uniforms, as well as all the corporate side that you might expect. And we work across, as I say, military, police, security, transport, aviation. So a really diverse range of end user clients that we support in lots of ways.
And I guess congratulations are in order. You mentioned the 10 years, but it's literally like this week, right?
Yeah, it is. We're celebrating this week with some of our clients. So yeah, it's really exciting. The business is very different to when I initially set it up, moving across to the buyer side. But yeah, it's really exciting time. We did a big rebrand last year, and the team changed slightly as the business was growing. We moved into an employee model rather than the consultant model. Although we still use consultants to kind of flex up the resource when we need to, but it just gives clients more stability as our business has grown and we've got more and more demand from clients. So it was a big change last year in preparation for celebrating this year. So It's been exciting.
The employee model you're saying is your own. That's for Workwear Solutions.
Yeah.
You are consultative. Right? You're not brought on as a staff, you're a consultative staff.
No, exactly. Yeah. So we become part of our clients' teams, but as a third party. So we bridge the gap between the buyer and the supply chain. But from our business model, like directly moving into that employee model was quite a big step change. It was really great. And we've got a fantastic team and still have other consultants that we can bring in. But yeah, we're used on a consultancy basis by our clients. Sometimes they'll contract us for several years. Sometimes it's just project by project, so it varies depending on the client. But yeah, that's how we work.
Did you grow up, Natalie, as a little girl saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I want to be a uniform
consultant.
Consultant. How did you end up doing this?
Well, I actually grew up as a little girl wanting to be a lawyer and decided that was
Ah,
not the career path for me. So I actually got into the uniform industry completely by lucky, happy mistake, by coincidence. So I started off in the industry 20 years ago, and I worked for one of the biggest uniform companies in the UK at the time, Alexandra. They're part of MyHub. That was, yeah, 20 years ago. And I kind of worked across lots of different sectors with them and did a graduate scheme where I worked in all the different departments, which was super helpful for giving me a good grounding. And then, yeah, I've worked through the industry, like I say, about 10 years ago, set up by myself. So it's been quite a journey.
and really though, you know, uh, you've come a long way because now you are on like standards committees and you're literally
Hmm.
writing standards for things and
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
yeah.
when you, yeah, sorry, why don't you
So
talk about how the standards works in Europe?
yeah, so when I first got asked to, as part of a safety body in the UK, who kind of do testing to make sure that you, as a supplier of PPE, are meeting your obligations. So I started off working with them and part of their special interest groups, and unsurprisingly, to those of you who know me, was quite vocal and quite passionate about trying to get things right. And they nominated me to apply for a role in standards. So 3 or 4 years ago now, I became chair of the committee on behalf of the British Standards Institution that oversees all protective clothing standards on behalf of the UK, except for firefighting PPE. And so all of those committees, literally from like gum shields and safety helmets in sports, all the way through to nuclear PPE, all sits within my remit. So it's a really, really broad scope that we look at, and it's great because from our client's point of view, we know what standards are being worked on in advance, and we know, like, for example, there's some work going on with flame retardant product at the moment within Europe, and so we know there's going to be changes to design or to fabric requirements or testing, and we can kind of future proof some of that. But as part of that, I then got asked to I also then represent the UK and Europe, the UK in European and ISO meetings for various different subjects. And I got asked to take on a project with BSI for the inclusive PPE standard. And that really kind of changed the way that we're looking at PPE within the UK. That launched last September, and we went from our initial committee meeting through the public consultation and into a publication of the standard within 12 months, which is very, very fast for standardization. And
Yeah.
the BSI had their 125th birthday, so a bit older than our company. They were the first standards body in the world, wrote the first ever standards for anything,
Wow.
and it's really fascinating kind of history that they have. And yeah, they had a celebration, and I actually got an award for the impact that I've made on health, safety and well-being, so that was amazing. So yeah, so
Congratulations.
as then
Yeah.
off on the back of that, I've then become the European expert, so I'm now working at European level and leading the inclusivity in PPE standards. So looking at developing a European version of the standard that we wrote in the UK, but also looking at some of the issues around the technical product standards, like the test methods for gloves, where 86% of women's hands are too small for the smallest glove size that's tested, and really trying to improve and enhance how that whole process works to be more inclusive. So yeah, I feel like standards and inclusivity is like 50% of my life these days.
Really?
And
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah, there is. So yeah,
Is
it's exciting.
inclusivity as a concept specifically towards gender, towards women?
No,
Or okay.
it's the start, and the gender piece is really the conversation starter, because there are still, like, we're in 2026 and there are still women working in predominantly dominated industries that still don't have fit for purpose kit, and that could be in construction. It's also in like policing and in military when you talk about body armor, but it also means lots of other things. So it think about changes that someone will go through in their life, whether that's illness, whether that's a woman becoming pregnant and then breastfeeding and returning to work, like her body has changed so much, but also things like neurodiversity, skin sensitivities, and how we design and develop product that helps support like the whole workforce and not just based on the anthropometric data of one particular section of the population, which is what happens at the moment.
It's really hard to do that at scale, isn't it? Because the business numbers guy in my head, Natalie, is sitting there going, yeah, but it's such a small part of the industry, right? It's the ends of the bell curve, right?
It's not always, and what we're finding, and what will happen more and more. So there's an MP in the Labour Party who has become very vocal about the need for inclusive PPE to become a mandated part of public sector tendering.
Yeah.
And I think that will start to grow more and more. So the message will be, if you can't do the 10% that's difficult, you don't get the 90%. So commercially, it won't make sense for manufacturers and dealer distributors to actually only focus on that part of the sector that they want to, or public sector buyers in particular will have to change the way that they're purchasing so that they don't have single supply anymore if that single supply route doesn't offer them everything they need. But it's also things, women make up 51% of the population, so we're not a minority group. We happen
Right,
to
right,
be
right.
a smaller group in some sectors, but
In
you
some
look at
sec-
airlines and you've got up to 60% of cabin crew could be female, whereas
Mhm.
in military you might have 20%, or sectors that are looking at, there's a lot of talk of particular sectors like aggregates and construction in the UK that have been working towards 30% by 2030. So it's not as much of a minority as you think. And we also had a really interesting conversation this week with a fire service in the UK. And they said, menopause, we want to talk about menopause wear. So we knew that we needed to provide a solution. So we created this whole separate range that was menopause specific, and nobody took it up. And I said, well, I can see why, because you created this stigma around it. And then if I'm going through menopause and I might not even be sure if it's menopause or perimenopausal, how do I go up to my manager or to the stores person and say, can I have one of your menopause products, please? Because I'm going through menopause. Like it's not something that you can stigmatize in that way. But let's think about what you need to provide someone if they're going through menopause. What you need is breathable fabrics. You need comfortable fabrics. You need design that thinks about seam construction around the crotch area, for example, how the waistband is constructed. And those things are benefits to everybody. So if you have your entire workforce in mind and you design for everybody, what you'll find is that everybody else will benefit from that 10% bell curve. People who've got skin sensitivities will benefit from having softer materials or more breathable materials. And somebody who's got who might be neurodivergent that maybe has ADHD, for example, certain textiles will be really distracting for somebody. So if you think about a waterproof jacket that's really noisy when you move and it's quite like a cheap fabric, that's really distracting. And if someone's working on the highways and they're distracted by what they're wearing, they cause a problem for themselves and also their teams. So it's really about thinking about it differently. And yeah, that's my not very short answer to your question.
No. And you and I have talked a lot about this,
We have.
you know, uh, and it's hard to just summarize certain things. I mean, I always I always use the comparison for people who don't work in our industry on the concept that we're not companies that can simply announce we outfit women sizes 0 to 9, right?
Mm.
And the rest
Mm.
of you, we appreciate you have to wear clothes, but you're going to have to shop somewhere else, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, it's not like you're a retailer and you can choose what your demographic wants to be or your
that's
age
right.
group, or you can't, it's not that. We have to cover all parts of society.
Yes. Yeah, every
Mm.
size. So when you
Mm.
think about that, and these, companies you're helping, and they're very diverse in many cases,
Hmm.
right? Like you're mentioning,
Hmm.
it could be, well, I'm not going to say, but I know it goes from consumer types of, companies that are facing the public to military. I mean, just
Yeah.
that
Mm.
range is huge.
Mm.
Is there a commonality among the challenges, or what are the challenges over the last few years that you're really seeing rising to the
Mhm.
surface for PPE or for just uniforms and workwear in general?
I think there's a few themes, and some of them are driven by regulation changes or legislative
Mm,
changes. So things like digital product passports and the transparency that that requires within the supply chain. Some of it is driven, for example, within Europe, by the concerns around stability of supply chain outside of Europe and how that is kind of protected. I know the US have been focused on that for a little bit longer than Europe, but it's thinking about how is that all managed and how do you sort of secure your supply chain, particularly, but sustainability in general. And there are changes again to regulations that affect both buyers and also the supply chain. And so
mhm,
our job really is to try and navigate that for them and to try to help develop procurement processes and specifications for products that will fit within those restrictions and those limitations caused by some of the regulations. And I would say this, wouldn't I, but inclusivity is really
mhm,
has got so much momentum and energy behind it, because I think a lot of people have just kind of had enough of it not being available. And
mm,
what I know has started to come out, and several they've also reported this in the US, is looking at sort of national safety bodies saying, hang on a minute, we're actually putting people at greater risk because they might have secondary risks of trips and falls and hazards that they're supposed to be protected
mm,
against. There's then an additional hazard that's being created. So, for example, if I'm 5'1", so if you put me in a standard size male trouser, it will be far too long for me and I'm going to trip over, or my gloves are too big so I can't grip. And
mm,
very little of the reporting in those, like the health and safety executive in the UK and their equivalents, very little of that reporting actually recognises the role of the PPE. So, for example, if I was walking up a wet steel staircase on the outside of a building and I slipped, they'd put it down to the fact it had been raining. They wouldn't allocate it to the fact that my boots were too big and my trousers were too long and I couldn't grip properly, because if I'd been able to grip and I had more secure footing, maybe I wouldn't have fallen. So there's a real push to try and get more of that data starting to be recorded so that it can be really understood as a problem. But it's a genuine health and safety and well-being issue for wearers. And when you think about some of the litigious markets that we work in, where
yeah.
if somebody's injured in work, there's a huge cost to that, like for the
Mhm.
insurance payouts and everything else. And so actually it's kind of counterproductive and counterintuitive to allow the money to be spent in that way, when if you invested it properly in kit in the first place, you may be reducing significantly your downtime and your injury rates.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I started thinking about the liability side as you were saying,
Mm,
uh,
mm,
saying all of
yeah.
that, and but having the data allows you to avoid
To make those
huge,
decisions.
right?
Mm,
But sometimes that's a hard sell, right?
mm,
Um, so companies that are then rethinking their programs.
mhm,
Um, uh, and you're hoping that they're going to take into account the things you're talking about. I mean, what would
mhm.
be like, I don't know, what would be three things that you'd want to, make sure that a company thinks about if they're considering or they're already starting up redoing their uniforms? And
Yeah,
should
I
they
think.
redo their uniforms? Some companies are probably going to be like, no, we don't want to redo our uniform. I don't know.
I think if you're talking PPE specifically, we've definitely seen a trend where PPE and technical specialists within organisations are kind of retiring out, and there hasn't been the succession planning for those. So
Oh.
before you go into those kind of processes, it's like, do you have the latest information about the most relevant standards, and do you know what your workforce looks like to be able to protect them in the way that you need to? So sometimes we also see risk assessments are really quite old, and there's been changes to operating models that maybe haven't been fully covered off by risk assessment. So all of that kind of risk part and understanding the standards is really key. And then I would say definitely from an inclusivity point of view, like understand what your workforce looks like. Because if you don't know what that profiling is, how can you possibly make sure that your uniform program or your PPE program is going to be fit for purpose for that workforce? And the other thing actually is thinking about cost over life. So more often than not, price is a key driver in some of these procurement processes, and having too high a percentage within your procurement process can be counterintuitive because you're driving quality down by driving price down. So we would always recommend that a maximum of 25 to 30% of the award criteria is allocated to cost, and instead try to look at how you do the cost over life. So how many times are you expecting to have to replace that product, and how can you design or build more durable products, because they're more sustainable inherently, because the fewer you need to buy, the fewer you need to make, and therefore you're
Hmm.
halving your production CO2 and your water kind of levels that are being used as well. So yeah, thinking about cost over life, I think, will help address a lot of issues from a sustainability point of view, and from a kind of wearer satisfaction point of view as well. We don't talk very much about it, but there's something really important about emotional durability. And by
Ooh,
that, I mean,
that. Whoa.
so the if I have a garment that I love, I will look after that so beautifully. If I don't like it,
Oh.
I'm not so worried. I stick it in on whatever wash temperature, like, but my cashmere jumper goes, like, it's hand washed and looked after. So when you put that into a uniform scenario, if you've got a product that you feel really proud to wear and that you feel really safe in and you are comfortable, you want to hold on to that for as long as possible, in case the next time they change suppliers, they give you something that isn't as good. And so that's a really interesting kind of like psychological part of what we deliver in uniform programs that often doesn't get considered.
That's so interesting. There's a story that I've told over the years that I heard at one point about fast food restaurants, right? Our quick
Hmm.
service fast food restaurants that, you know, that if someone's going to the family picnic on the weekend, they might wear their polo or their t-shirt from work because honestly, they just got it like a week ago, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's the nice shirt they might have in the moment, right?
Yeah,
So, but that's just adding to this wear and tear, which the employer might not appreciate, you know,
yeah,
if they're going to wear out the garments a little bit faster. But
yeah.
the concept, but I love reversing that. I love saying,
Mm,
well, no, let's say that that's a great thing because that means like they actually, you know, take
mm,
pride in it,
mm, mm.
and you know they're going to care for it better, and they're going to wear it, you know, everywhere.
Mm. Well, but also that then you'll get longer life out of it, because they'll look after it properly. They will consider it, and then you don't get issues, or not as much issues, where someone's boil washing a polo shirt and the color fades out of it because that's not what it was designed to be washed at. And then you've got two people stood next to each other that don't look the same anymore
Mm.
because one's overworn there. So there's lots of benefits in terms of like corporate identity and all of those things, to kind of really encourage people to want to look after their uniform items as well.
I mean, the technologies keep improving just everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we can hold color for more washings than when you and I first, you know, realized there was a uniform industry and we were going to be part of it. But, you know, what do you see as technologies that are, you know, influencing things for your clients
Mm.
in significant ways?
Because we don't manufacture anything, the sort of technology piece for us is in sort of the design and the presentation side.
Hmm.
So we never use AI to design product, but we will take a product we've designed once we've got initial buy-in from the client, and then we've turned it into AI images. We've actually just done one for a client that's a video, like a runway, for them. So that's really bringing to life the uniforms for people, because so many times we've sat and said, imagine this polo, but like in this color from this tiny lab dip that's the size of a postage stamp. And that's a really difficult thing for somebody to understand. But now we can say, if you want it in this color, this is what it looks like, or with this, or if we change the
Ah,
trousers to be a different shade, now you can see it. That reduces sampling, because you don't need to sample in all those colors or with all those configurations, but you can use it to save on that as well. So if we do that in the initial stages and get the buy-in from the client on the design side, when you go into the specifications and manufacturing, like the manufacturer then hasn't got to do multiple repeats of samples, because we've already moved the client into that level where they're happy with the overall design, or with
hmm.
the sort of image of it as well. We've also done it to like swap out different logo variations again, so you're not sampling, you're showing what that looks like. And we've even for one of our clients that has in a really high profile and high risk environment that has security around there, that are
Mhm.
very often in the media, we've developed a kind of uniform profile for them, so that when they get their bespoke fitting done, there's an agreement on what the standardization is for where the jacket finishes on the body, or where the sleeve length finishes, and that kind of thing. So it
Oh,
really helps also from a like operational point of view, like, no, this is what you're supposed to look like, and helps to kind of, well, but I like mine to be a little bit further down on the hip, or I want mine on the waist, and you can create more uniformity like that for clients too.
yeah, yeah, I could see that running into like what we call over here our Class A types of uniforms, right? Where you're going in
Yeah,
for something that's a little more ceremonial, or you might wear
yeah,
it to,
exactly. Yeah.
but even that should be like if you have multiple
Mm,
people in ceremonial dress, you don't want
mm.
their lapels different
The most
sizes. You don't want their
correct. Yeah. And then once you've got agreement on that, that's where you build that, like the lapel size into the specification, so that you can hold that quality level, you can hold that design exactly as it should be. I mean, we've also looked at it for like band uniforms for the military as well, like,
Mm,
because they obviously have to look identical, but you have, people playing different musicians. You've got really tall drummers, you've got short drummers, like, and they need to look the same, even though they physically might be very different in
yeah.
their body shape. And it's understanding how do you get that those kind of profiles and those rules of the uniform and the dress requirements to work across those workforces, because people are different shapes and sizes, and you want that consistency.
Wild. Would you recommend the uniform industry to go into these days?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And actually, I spend a lot of time doing exactly that. We work with
Oh,
a university near us. I've been working with them since 2018. And I've taken rolls of fabrics, I've taken samples, they've cut up pockets, and I've done guest lectures on how you design around some of the product standards. And actually, Rebecca, who works with us, is one of the graduates that I met there. And as
no
soon as I
way.
could afford
Oh,
to employ her, she came on board. So she's amazing, bringing a really like unique approach and different kind of different mindset to how we've been used to working in the uniform industry. So yeah, I absolutely love it, and I think if you can find those graduates who really understand it, and they want to move from fashion that isn't necessarily seen as sustainable, but they want to move into something that is much more driven around purpose and around functionality and performance, that's much more exciting as a career path, I think, for a lot of younger people. So yeah, so I absolutely advocate it, and I also spend a lot of time trying to encourage people into our industry too.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. Next year, I'm going to have you talk at the convention to some of our students. I don't think we had you
Yeah,
do that this year, right? No,
I
no,
haven't
no.
done it yet.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
each year we've been trying to invite schools to bring some students to our
Mm.
convention and meet with our industry and just
Hmm.
hear the talks and maybe be inspired by the exhibit hall, right?
Yeah.
Very similar to what you're talking about. And I know, yeah. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for. Was there anything I didn't ask you that you thought I was going to ask you that you want to
I don't
mention?
think so. I think we covered it. But we did our
Uh,
usual, meandered around and had a great
Yeah,
chat.
no, I thought we were somewhat linear, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and be the first one to go live with me here. And
Pleasure.
the big fear is we always say we would say too much, right? But we didn't. I think you and I
We
did
didn't.
great. All right,
Well,
thank you,
thank you for
Natalie.
having me.
Where's the